Psychology, people with social anxiety tend to stick to familiar faces in any social setting. If they agree to meet a friend and the friend unexpectedly brings someone new, they feel awkward and uncomfortable. They dread the thought of strangers starting conversations and even avoid eye contact with people handing out flyers. Because they don't talk much, others might think they're rude, cold, or even arrogant. But the truth is, they genuinely don't know what to say. A lot of people assume the biggest problem with social anxiety is low self-esteem, but that's just the surface. The real issue is self-deprecation. Over time, constantly putting themselves down leads to low self-esteem. Where does self-deprecation come from? The habit of self-deprecation often stems from childhood. Many people with social anxiety grew up with overly critical parents. Parents who always noticed their mistakes and shortcomings, pointed them out bluntly, and criticized them without restraint. To these parents, their child could never do anything right, and no matter how hard the child tried, it was never good enough. Over time, the child develops a psychological defense mechanism called identification. They start believing, if my parents criticize me so much, it must mean I'm the problem. I'm not good enough. This leads to habitual self-criticism and self-deprecation. Even after leaving that environment and no longer facing external criticism, these individuals continue to put themselves down because it's become an ingrained habit. What can you do if you struggle with social anxiety? If you think you have social anxiety, the first step is understanding a concept called emotional flashbacks. An emotional flashback is an overwhelming, distressing regression to childhood feelings of shame, fear, or inadequacy. When you feel terrified in social situations, you're often re-experiencing those childhood emotions. How to manage emotional flashbacks. 1. Recognize your state. Start by identifying your emotions. Are you feeling anxious, afraid, ashamed, or physically tense? Are you imagining worst-case scenarios? Acknowledge what's happening and say to yourself, I'm experiencing an emotional flashback. 2. Remind yourself you're safe. Tell yourself, even though I feel scared right now, I'm safe. There's no real danger. I'm an adult now, and I can protect myself. The next step, systematic desensitization. This method, also known as gradual exposure therapy, was introduced by a South African psychologist. It's a simple two-step process. 1. Create a social anxiety hierarchy. Make a list of situations that trigger your anxiety, ranked from least to most stressful. Assign a score to each situation based on how anxious it makes you feel. The more detailed your list, the better. 2. Gradual exposure. Start with the easiest item on your list and practice it repeatedly until it feels natural. For example, in the first week, you might practice asking a stranger for directions. Do it so often that it eventually feels as comfortable as talking to a close friend. Once you've mastered one level, move on to the next. Over time, your social anxiety will gradually decrease. Sometimes social anxiety is a kind of armor, a way we protect ourselves. To truly address it, ask yourself, what am I really trying to protect by avoiding social situations? Understanding what's behind your avoidance is the first step to breaking free.